Clustering and high availability in checkpoint firewalls. Hello guys, today we will explore and configure clustering on the checkpoint firewalls and gateways. So what the clustering feature does is that it is used for the purpose of availability, redundancy and load sharing. And in case of one of your device goes down, the other one should continue to provide services. This keyword cluster was introduced by Checkpoint, and Cisco also has introduced that failover term for this. And there are two types of clustering in the checkpoint gateways. One of them is high availability, which is called HA, and the other one is load sharing. And there are two modes to each one of them. High availability has new mode and legacy mode, and load sharing has multicast and unicast. So let me quickly go through them and then we will move on configuring them. Now in high availability, one of your firewalls or gateways will be in the active state, and that would continue forwarding traffic, and the other one would be in the passive state and waiting for the active in case of it goes down. So the passive would take over. So considering this being my topology, let me explain this. Let me get rid of this. So let's say I have two firewalls, the firewall 1 and firewall 2, and I have subnet that's towards the public network with the shiny cloud. So it's 291.330, and I have a sync link between them that is directly connected, having 10.1.1.0 prefix of 24 here, and I have an internal network that's 192.168.2.0. So this is my internal subnet, and this is my external subnet, and this is my sync subnet. In the new mode of the high availability, you will need a virtual IP address for every subnet, internal and external. So let's say in this case, I have firewall 1 having an IP address of from this range and on this interface .1, and I have firewall 2 having an IP address of .2 from this range, which is 192.168.2.0, and I will assign them a virtual IP address of 254, let's say, the last IP address, which will be the gateway of all the internal clients inside my network. And similarly, I have an external subnet where this interface of the firewall 1 would have an IP address of 201, let's say, and this would have 202 from this range, 291.33.0, and the virtual IP I will have would be, let's say, 254 once again. Now in the new mode, all the traffic would go, let's say this is my active firewall, all the traffic would go through this path. Let's say this is my active box and this is my passive, let's say. So in case this goes down, this would take over. So that's how new mode works. In the legacy mode, you will not be having this virtual IP address. What would happen is that all the internal clients would have the primary or the active gateway's IP address assigned as of their gateway. So in case this goes down, in that case, this IP address would automatically get assigned to the passive gateway. Like let's say right now it is .1 here. So if in case this goes down, this .1 would be assigned here, and this .1 would be the gateway of all the internal users. So that is the legacy, where you would not be having a virtual IP address, and in the new you will need to have a virtual IP address. Now in load sharing, both of the devices would actively forward traffic, where in HA all the traffic or 100% of the traffic was going through the active and passive was just standby. And in load sharing we have two modes once again, the multicast and the unicast. So let me quickly explain this as well. Let me get rid of some of these. So in both multicast and unicast, you would still need to have a virtual IP address. However, the only difference between these two is that in multicast, 50% of your traffic goes through firewall 1 and 50% of your traffic goes through firewall 2. However, in the unicast, for a couple of initial negotiation or session messages, the traffic would go, let's say, through one of the firewalls, which is 30%, and for the rest of the traffic, it would go through another firewall, which would be 70%. So multicast uses 50-50 and unicast uses 30-70. But in both cases, both of the firewalls would actively forward traffic. Now let's go ahead and configure them. I also have a cluster IP that I would use for the purpose of management on this subnet from my policy management server. So let's go ahead to my topology. Let me clear the screen. And so as you can see, I have 3 sites. Let me first start these because they would take time. So I have 3 sites, the headquarter site, site 1 and site 2. I did not pick the HQ site because I had to remove all these links and then add them. So I picked site 2 and I added another firewall here. So the concept is same whether you add another firewall here or here. So the concept is same. The internal subnet I have here is 192.168.2.0, and I have firewall 1 and firewall 2, and these are the IP addresses in this subnet, and I have an external subnet that's in this range, and I have 201 on this firewall as of external IP, and I have 202 on this interface of firewall 2. So I just have added these boxes and gateways, and they have no config inside them and not even IP addresses. So let's go ahead and quickly configure the IP addresses and put some static routes, a default route pointing to the public network and a static route pointing to the 192.168.11.0, because I will add these two gateways in my management server. I also need to start this switch. Let me clear the screen. And let's configure them. So it took a little while to boot up. Let me start this PC too. So the username is admin, password is admin123. Let's go ahead and set IP addresses to my ETH0 interfaces of both of the firewalls. So set interface ETH0 IPv4 address, and it's 200.91.33.201 with a prefix length of 24. And let's go ahead and set a gateway, default gateway pointing to R1. Set static route, default next hop is an address, sorry, gateway address, and it is 291.33. It's 1. You can set a priority if you wanted to, so just go ahead and on it. I want to add this, and I will also add a static route to the internal network of HQ. which is 11.0 and point it to the CPHQ. So set static route 192.168.11.0/24. Next hop is a gateway with an address of 291.33 and it is 222 and 222 on. So I will assign an IP address to my firewall 2, ETH0 interface. Username is admin, password is admin123. So set interface ETH0 IPv4. It's 291.33.202 with a prefix of 24, and I'll set a static route towards the internal network, which is 11.0. So static route 192.168.11.0/24. Next hop is a gateway of address 291.33.222 and on, and I'll go ahead and assign a default route. So set static route default. Next hop is a gateway address of 291.33.1 and on. So I'll go ahead and do the initial config from one of the PCs. Let's go ahead and do it from here. Let me see if I can ping them. Ping 291.192.133.201. So I can reach to the firewall 1. Let me ping firewall 2. Can reach there as well. Let me go ahead and do the initial config. So HTTPS yes, it's 291.33.201 and the other one is HTTPS 291.33.202 firewall 2. The username is admin123. Let me resize it. Next. So next. So default next. Let's go ahead and assign an IP to the ETH1, which is this interface. So the IP address is 2.1 for the firewall 1, this one from this subnet, and the mask is 24.0. Next, the host name is CP site 1 firewall 1. The DNS is, I will point it to my internal DNS, which is 11.10. Next, time zone. Next. So here I will only check the gateway, not the management. So you can also enable the clustering feature from the CLI, and you can enable it here as well. So if you wanted to go ahead and enable it from the CLI, what you would need to do is you would say cpconfig. So let's log in. Admin123 cpconfig. So I right now have not done the initial config. Let me go ahead and do try the command here. So admin123. So cpconfig. So from here you can do a lot of things like changing your trusted key, but here on the 6th option you can enable the clustering feature, it will require a reboot. So if you press 6 and then enter, it will ask you that you really want to enable the clustering feature, and then it will ask you for a reboot. So I'll go ahead and enable it here as well. You can enable it here. Next, the SIG key is test123, test123. You can enable reset this SIG key from here as well by the 5th option. Next, finished, yes, and firewall 2, accept. So it's admin 123. Next, 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 and the IP of the firewall 2 is 2.2, 2.2, 24. Next, and the host name is, let's say, CP site 2 firewall 2. The DNS is 1110. Next, time zone. Next, next, only the gateway, and I'll select the cluster feature. Next, test123, test123, finished, yes. I'll also assign an IP to my internal PC of site 2. So it's 192.168.2.3, and the gateway is 1, but I don't want because I will be using a virtual IP address for both high availability and the load sharing, both types. So I'll say 254 because that I will use for the as of the virtual IP address. Domain is motasim.com, and the DNS is 1110. So host name, okay, connect this, and let's wait for this configuration to finish. So I'll pause the video and I'll resume once it's done. So the installation has completed on both the checkpoint gateways, the firewall 1 and firewall 2. Let's also assign IP addresses to the ETH2 interfaces for the purpose of sync. Admin 123. Let's log into firewall 1. So network interfaces. So ETH2 edit. I'll enable this interface, and the IP is 1.1.1 on this side and 2 on the other. Okay. Admin 123 firewall 2, this one, and network interfaces, edit, enable, and it's 10.1.1.2. Now let's go ahead and add both of them in a cluster, and add them in my policy management server. Let me check if my API has started. So API status. So yeah, it is started. Let me smart console from this PC to the policy management server, and from there I'll add both of them in a cluster. Smart console. So the username is admin, password is admin123, 11.11. Login. So I do not have any cluster, and I have not added those two firewalls here. I have my PMS and HQ having a warning because of the evaluation would expire on the 10th. So I will create a new cluster. You have two options, wizard and classic. So I'll go with wizard mode, and here you can name it, let's say site 2 cluster, and the IP address of the cluster would be this IP address 291.33.250 that we would use for the purpose of cluster management. So it's 291.33.250, and you have two modes here, high availability and load sharing, where in high you have new and legacy mode, and in load sharing you have unicast and multicast. So I will go ahead with high availability. We will later on change it to load sharing. Next. And here you can add the members. So if you already have the existing members here that are already added to your management server, you can add existing, or if you are adding new gateways, so you would say new cluster member. Next. So the first firewall is CP site 2 FW1, and the IP address is 291.33.201, which is this IP address 201, this subnet firewall 1, and the key is test 123, test 123, initialize. Okay, and I'll add another one which is firewall 2. So it's CP site 2 firewall 2, and the IP is 291.33.202. The other firewall, the key is test 123, test 123, initialize. Okay, and I'll say next. If you have other firewalls in this cluster, you can add them. If you may have third one or fourth one, you can add them here. Next. So here, this is the subnet that I would use for the cluster synchronization. This is my primary one, and the other one would be the secondary. So I'll say next. And this is the internal subnet where I will say use a virtual address for this virtual IP, and that virtual IP address would be 192.168.2.254. Mask is 24 for the internal users. Here they will point their default gateway to that 254, which is the virtual IP address, and I will use another virtual IP address for the external for this subnet, which would be 291.33.254, 24. Next, if you want to edit the cluster properties, you can say edit. So I'll say finish. So this cluster training is followed by the VPN video that we previously did. So if you guys haven't seen the VPN setup or configuration, you can go ahead and do that as well, because I will apply a VPN on this cluster so that all my internal users of site 2 be able to reach site 1 internal users and be able to have also uh, a VPN connection to the internal network of headquarter, the central site. So you can see that my cluster is added, site 2 cluster. I'll go ahead and publish and install this on both the gateways. I'll install, publish and install. So I have my site 2 cluster selected, which has 2 gateways. So I'll install this. And while this is doing the installation, let's go ahead and go to the properties of the cluster. Right click, edit. I will attach the VPN community that we previously created. So I'll check here. I'll go ahead and add the full mesh here on the cluster, which would automatically add it on both gateways. And the link selection, I'll select this link, which is the 33.254, which is the virtual IP address on the external subnet. And I will go ahead and for the networks that I want to protect would be VPN domain, and I will manually protect one subnet, which is 2, which we previously created, this network object, which is my this subnet. So if you haven't checked the VPN video, you can go back and check that video as well. So I'll say okay. I'll also need to publish this as well. So let's wait for this installation to complete. Then we will install the other one. So the installation has succeeded. So they're showing me down, but they would eventually come up. Let's wait for this. So they are both up. We will install the VPN on both the gateways and the cluster. And if in case they do not come up, you will need to enable, you need to check if it's enabled, the cluster feature is enabled. Admin 123. You will need to say cp config once again. If they do not come up, you will need to make sure that they are enabled. So it's already enabled here. And we can also check now the active and the standby member by saying cpha probe and state. So right now you can see that 10111 is, which is the local, which is this gateway, the first one, firewall 1, and you can see that it is the active one, and the other one, which is 10112, that is the standby. So if in case the active goes down, the standby would take over. And here you can see all the load is only assigned to the firewall 1, which is 100%. So let's go ahead and try to ping test it from my PC2. So let me go to PC2 and terminal. So my IP is 2.3 already. So if I try pinging my virtual IP address, which is 2.254, so I'm able to ping the virtual IP address, but in this situation, in this case, it's assigned to the firewall 1. And let's see if my VPN installation has succeeded. So it has succeeded. Let's go ahead and ping it ping from my site 2 to the headquarter. Let's ping this IP address, which is 1112. So I will say ping 192.168.11.12. So as you can see that I'm able to ping the central site or the HQ and this PC. Now I will leave this ping going on and I will shut this device off and see if the standby takes over. So I'll right click and stop this. So as you can see that I do not have even a single packet drop. So that's why Checkpoint calls it zero drop. So all the traffic is now routed to using the firewall 2. So if I come here and check firewall 1 is down, and if I go to firewall 2, admin 123, and if I say CPHA probe state, so I'll see that the primary or the active one is down and the standby has taken over, which is this. And because of this interface is down, I don't see that sync connection now, and all the traffic is routed via firewall 2 and the load is 100% on the firewall 2. So I'll bring this back up. So I'll wait for this to come up, then we will change it from the high availability to the load sharing. So I'll pause the video and wait until firewall 1 is booted again. So the firewall 1 has come back up again. So I'll right click on the cluster, edit. So in the cluster members, if you wanted to add another, you can add it here. And if you wanted to increase the priority, right now in this case the active member is this, and this would be the standby. And if you wanted to make the firewall 2 as of the active, so you can increase the priority here, or you can decrease the priority of firewall 1, then the firewall 2 would be the active and the other one would be the standby. And here you can change from the high availability mode to the load sharing. So we will go ahead and change it to the load sharing. Here you have two options, multicast and unicast. Let's go with the unicast. So I'll say OK. And I'll need to publish this on both the gateways and the cluster. Install. So once this is completed, we will see it because unicast is using 30-70%, where 30% of the traffic would go via the first firewall for the first initial negotiation and session creation, etc., and rest of the 70% of the traffic would continue going on the other firewall. So I will check this. Let's wait for the installation to complete. So it's almost there. So I'll log in, admin 123. So it's CPHA probe state. Now here you can see 30% of the traffic, the load is going via this device, and rest of the, which is 70%, is going via the other device. But the state of both of the firewalls are inactive, and we can change it from the unicast to multicast by right clicking, edit, and let's change it from the unicast to multicast. And here you can say shall it be doing load sharing based on IP ports and SPIs, or IP and ports, or only IPs. So I'll select this IP ports and SPI all. Okay. I will install this, and we will go ahead and test it from the client PC too, from this PC. So my ping is right now going on. I will go ahead and capture traffic on firewall 1 on this interface and on this interface and see if both of the firewalls are actively forwarding traffic. So I will wait for the installation to complete. Then we will check if it's 50-50 because multicast is using 50-50. Load is shared on both devices. So installation is complete. I will say CPHA probe, and now you can see that load is assigned 50-50 on both of the gateways and both are active. So I will go ahead and resume my ping to this IP address, which is 1112. So ping is going on. I will go ahead and capture the ETH1 interface, and I also capture the firewall 2. So I will stop this, and I will stop this too. So I'll only filter ICMP traffic. So you can see some ICMP traffic is going on via, which one was this? I think this was firewall 1, ICMP. So you can see ICMP traffic is going via this path and this path. So both of the devices are actively forwarding traffic. And keep in mind that my ping is working because I have a security rule for my VPN full mesh, which is from all these 3 sites to all these 3 sites. And if you haven't checked the VPN video, go ahead and check that. That's why I assigned the full mesh VPN community on this cluster for site 2, and all these 3 sites has that VPN community on all these gateways. So that's how you configure clustering. Thank you.